Hi, today we're going to make yeast rolls, and this isn't going to be like a traditional yeast roll, but it is going to have amazing flavor, and it's going to help keep your blood glucose stable. So this is a cheese-based dough. So if you are dairy-free, and I'm sorry, it does have almond flour. If you're dairy-free or have almond flour issues or nut flour issues, then probably this isn't a recipe for you. But for the rest of us, this is something that you can enjoy. And of all the bread substitutes I've made, this is probably Grace's favorite. So we're going to start by activating our yeast. I do have 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. Now you could reduce it to 1/4 teaspoon. What happens is the yeast is going to eat the sugar, so I'm not really worried about that 1/2 teaspoon through the recipe, and you'll see the little yeast beginning to eat. Now I'm using a packet of rapid rise yeast. There is a difference between the rapid rise yeast and the other. This doesn't get quite as wet, and so we found that out the hard way with a couple other recipes, but this is the rapid rise instant yeast. I'm making a mess with it. And it is 1 packet, which is 1/4 ounce, which is 2 1/4 teaspoons. So 2 1/4 teaspoons, and I just buy it. It comes 3 to a pack. Now this is really hot tap water. I did warm it in the microwave. You don't want to do that. Normally just hot tap water. I knew I'd be talking, but normally hot tap water is plenty. You don't want it too hot or it will kill the yeast. And I'm just measuring out 1 tablespoon of that, and you'll see when I put this in here how it starts to activate and get all like the yeast gets happy, wakes it up, gets it alive, and you'll see it start to come alive if I haven't burned it with water that's too hot. So we'll see. But I'll just set that aside. You want to give it time to activate, and I do have some little yeast in there. Okay, now I have it on my finger. Okay, now the next step we're going to do, super easy, is combine our flours. And I forgot to get a whisk because I was trying to get this other stuff together. So sorry, David's going to grab that for me. I'm going to put in 1/4 of a cup of oat fiber. So 1/4 cup. Remember, I use Life Source oat fiber. I'll link to an Amazon store I put together so you guys can see, but it's actually less expensive at Nutrition. So I tend to buy it from Nutrition, and I buy like 4 or 5 bags at a time. This is almond flour. I'm using 1/2 cup. So 1/4 cup of oat fiber, 1/2 cup of almond flour. And I do keep my flours and stuff in the freezer because I'm not using them that frequently, trying to get all the almond flour out. So I do keep them in the freezer. You could do that, or the fridge. I also order it quite a bit at a time. Now we're using a lot of baking powder in this recipe. This is actually 2 tablespoons of baking powder, and it's the source of a lot of the carbs in this recipe. So because, yeah, there is some starch in there. So I'm adding that, and then I'm going to add just 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. That's it. And that's all that we're using for the flours. So I'm going to mix that with my little whisk that David had handed to me, and set that aside just like the yeast. And you can see the yeast is getting kind of bubbly and happy. I think it's happy. You'll see it get all foamy as it goes. It should get all foamy if I haven't killed it. Okay. I'm going to set that aside. Now here comes the next step. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to melt together 2 cups of cheese. Now 2 cups of, this is skim milk mozzarella. So this is a low-fat mozzarella. We're going to melt that. I'm just going to put it in I like to put this on the stove. You can melt it in the microwave, but honestly, I have better control over it. On the stovetop, I have a gas top, and I can see more like the right texture. And I'll also tell you, I'm going to use a spatula, but after you take it off and you're mixing the flours in, it really is helpful to kind of get your hands in there. So that's 2 cups of shredded. We did shred that ourselves. David got my little handy dandy gadget that goes on my KitchenAid and shredded that for me. And it is the skim milk, not the whole milk. You will tell a difference if you're using whole milk mozzarella. Also, if you're using pre-shredded, it has the food starches, and it will impact the recipe. And I tend to find it at Walmart, the big blocks that we can shred. So I'm going to put this in here. I am going to take it over to the cooktop. I'm just going to melt it on fairly low heat. I'm going to chunk up this while I'm talking. I'm going to melt it on fairly low heat, and then I'll bring it back, and you can see what happens with it when I add the almond flour, and then we're going to add eggs, and we're going to add the yeast back in. Okay, so I've been able, Grace helped me get this all melted, And you can see kind of what it looks like with the cream cheese and the mozzarella melted together. I also like it in this dish because it has a little more residual heat than when you microwave it. I'm going to add the flours to it while it's still really warm and set that aside. And I don't know how people cook without those glass bowls. I use those glass bowls all the time. And you can see it's really thick. If it gets like too difficult to incorporate, you can always put it back on the heat. But remember, there's not a ton of fat because we're using, well, there's fat in the cream cheese, but we're using the skim milk mozzarella, or the low fat. So I just want to get this all incorporated in relatively well, and I may get my hands in there. It's just so much easier when you do that, and it's not too hot. So I'm going to get my hands in. I should have rolled my sleeves up before I got started. Notice I'm getting my left hand in there, not my right, trying to keep it relatively clean. And then we'll put an egg in just a bit, and the flour will mix a little easier when we put more easily when we put it in there. But it's nice and warm. It's a great winter recipe because you're going to have the oven on. Our oven is preheated to 375 degrees. So that's taken care of. And I have oiled pans. And I'm going to show you kind of the difference too. I've oiled two. One is a 7.5-inch pan that I got at the Dollar Tree, and the other is an 8.5-inch pan. And I'm going to use the 7, and I'll explain why. But let me stop right there and add in the egg. And you can use a spatula or wooden spoon. Wooden spoon works really well for this too. I grabbed the spatula. I'm adding 2 large eggs. And this is where it really gets messy if you use your hands. But I still like to play in the dough like this. And I didn't beat the eggs ahead of time. You can. But you're just adding this into the dough. Now with the egg, the dough is going to become a lot more wet, and that's okay. Some people will look at this and be like, it's so wet, what did I do wrong? And often you didn't do anything wrong, it's just a wet dough. We're going to roll it into balls to make our yeast rolls. And there's so many things you really can do with this dough. This actually is a recipe that's going to be in the book that Grace and Jonathan and I have been working on called Growing Up Keto. And I should have taken my ring off. Oh well, I'll put that on my to-do list, get rings cleaned. But anyway, it's going to be in our book called Growing Up Keto, and I'm excited to do that book with the kids. It's the book for children and families, and the kids have done a great job adding their own little personal bits to the story, to the recipe. And they've also told me, can we say which of these we really don't like? There are some in there that aren't their favorites, but mine. And you can see what our yeast has done. It's puffed up just a little bit. It's bubbly. And so I'm going to put that in here and stir it in. Now at this point, everything's warm. The pan is warm. The yeast has been in that warm water, and the egg is all melted in. Ideally, what you want to do is cover this, and you can just cover it with a clean kitchen towel, and you just cover the top, like not the dough, and set it aside for about 20 to 25 minutes, and we can set a timer on this. You don't have to, but it gives it gives the yeast a chance to really activate, which we're not used to with low carb recipes. I'm going to go back to the bowl I used for the flour. I'm going to turn this out so you can see it a little bit better. I'm going to turn it out just like this. And I haven't really over mixed it with the yeast in there. I probably need to, but I'm going to just set it aside. And like I said, it won't double in size like a flour recipe would, but I'm just going to kind of get it mixed in there nicely. And again, like I said, put it in a nice warm place over by the stove. Set your timer. You can let it go longer. You can let it go 30 to 45 minutes, however long you can wait, but just a nice towel over it, cover it up, and then we'll see where it is in about 25-30 minutes. Okay, so our dough has been sitting for about 20 to 25 minutes, and you can see that it did rise a little bit if you compare where it was before to where it is now. Now this is a wet dough, and so we're gonna oil our hands. And what I've done is I've taken the tin pans and I've oiled it with ghee. You can use butter, coconut oil, whatever you prefer. I like using ghee. Or butter, and I'm gonna have, one of the reasons I oiled this is so that I have a convenient way to keep my hands greasy. And don't worry about how too much, you can see it's pretty liberally greased. And once my hands are oily, I can get it in the dough, and it is spongy like you would expect kind of a yeast dough to be. Now that's too big. What I'm gonna do is, and you can see it sticking to my fingers, kind of roll it into gentle balls. I'm not like squishing it down, but just kind of rolling it into balls. And I have not tried this. You could try doing like a second rise with it. And actually, instead of the 7-inch, I think I'm going to use the larger one. We'll see how it goes. This is 8.5 inches. So an 8-inch pan, if you have that. 9-inch may be a little big, I don't know. But basically what we're going to do is just roll it into balls until all the dough is gone. And I did say something really dumb before. I said that it's optional to let this rise. I'm gonna tell you to make sure you let it rise. And I'm gonna say a good 25 to 30 minutes. I know what you're thinking, like it's that much longer till you have yeast rolls in the oven, but it really is, I think, worth the wait. And now I'm doubting whether I should be using this bigger pan. I usually use a skillet, but we wanted to use these disposable pans. And notice how I have them touching. I wanted to use these disposable pans because they're super convenient, like for the holidays. They're convenient for, they're convenient for taking to people's houses. And so you can actually make them up ahead of time and then bake them. They don't do quite as well when you let them, they don't rise quite as much when you don't bake them immediately, but it's a possibility to do that. And you can see the dough is super, super sticky, and I probably need to clean my fingers and put some more oil on them. Like I said, this dough is super, super versatile. Okay, that will help. And I'm not doing these very uniformly because I'm talking and not paying a ton of attention to what I'm doing. But you want them in touching, and you want them all about 1.5 inches, 2 inches big. There's not really a wrong way to do this. And you can, like I said, set them aside and let them, I'm gonna use my spatula to get all the goodness up. And you can see they don't have to be perfect, and it is kind of wet. I'll separate these out just a bit. And this is probably the last one. So I have made from this 12, exactly 12 rolls. And like, they're not all uniform. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 12. I made 12. Okay. It's hard to count when they're like not in nice little neat rows. I'm gonna grab all the dough, and like I said, our oven is preheated to 375. I can put them in now. I can cover them again and let them get a second rise, but I'm gonna throw these in the oven so you can see what they look like. It's gonna take probably 20 to 25 minutes. We'll see what they look like. So the yeast rolls are ready, and I finally have help in the kitchen now that the yeast rolls are ready. And David's wearing his Thanksgiving shirt, his WKRP shirt. So I baked these in 2 different things so you can kind of see how it looks when we're done. So this is the 8.5 inch, and this is the 7 inch. I have to tell you, I really prefer this 7 inch just because they fluff and you can see them. I'll give you one of these. And I did use a knife to kind of go, but they look, yeah. Looks good. And I'm gonna dig in this one. But I did, like I said, I used my serrated knife to kind of go around them because as you can see, when they fluff up, they kind of all go together. But look at that. Like, see how I just think, like, compare, I know, I just think it's fluffier. And that little piece got in there. So David is eating his with butter and using my little wooden butter knife from Stockholm. What do you think?
It's good.
I love these. Now these are a little more moist. What about those? Is that, yeah?
Yep.
And I probably should have put them on a lower rack. I put them on at 375, and they do get, you can see they're pretty brown on top. And I could have reduced them to 350, but they run together more. So I kind of like it at 375, but I could have put them on a lower rack because the bottom's not quite as well done as the top. But I'm going to make a bacon sandwich with mine. So what do you think? I mean, does it remind you of a yeast roll, like a, see it's...
Sure, the yeast flavor does come through. I mean, it does remind you of yeast roll. It's a little bit denser than what you get in a wheat-based yeast roll, but I think it's good. And if you put butter on it, it glistens.
A little bit of butter.
Well, I've only got a little bit of butter.
Just like I put a little bit of bacon.
A little bit of bacon.
I really do like it. Now I was trying to think about the carbs for this. It was a half cup of almond flour, which is 12 and a half carbs. There's 23 in a full cup. And then you've got carbs in the egg. So there's 2 eggs. So that's like 1.2 carbs. The cheese would have some carbs, and the cream cheese. So the cream cheese, I buy the cream cheese that's 1 carb per tablespoon, I think. I'll have to look that out. But so that would have 4 carbs in it. And then the mozzarella shouldn't have many, but fractional carbs. I use 2 cups, so maybe we'll count 4 for that. So we're up to about 22, 23 carbs for the entire thing. So I'm gonna guess, this is a guesstimate. So make sure you count it for the carbs that you, for the ingredients that you use, because not everybody finds the cream cheese that's 1 carb per serving. But I'm gonna say these are about 2 carbs each. Does that sound about right with my math? Assuming you get 12. Now I did only make 11 here. I did make it easy 12 here. I had a bit of trouble with my math. These are better done but they are flatter. And I just love kind of the rise for these. But I hope that, you know, this versatile recipe, you can make a lot of different things with it. And so that I hope if you make it, especially for your holiday table, that you and your family will enjoy it too.